Greetings, everyone. We are together at the 67th video of the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary series.
Greetings, dear friends.
Last week, we had read and discussed about the cadres of the original principle, of the mechanism of destiny, and of the original time. This week, we will read more details about these cadres of duty, and most of the questions you had sent us last week will be answered by the passages we will read this evening. Alright, let's start reading. In the plan of duty, there is no question of uniqueness, that is, any activity as a single individual. In there, only groups work. However, each group is considered a single individual. That is, every individual of that group is the group itself and the group is the one individual. Therefore, assignment of a being in duty in the plan of duty, for example with a deed, means the assignment of the whole group to which that being in duty is subject. This is because all of the comprehensions in that group congregate upon that duty as a single comprehension. Therefore, here there is no question of separate identities. And this is one of the characters, which is unknown and impossible to apply in the world, of the wholeness in the plan of duty. For example, in very rare cases, a single embodied being in duty who has taken on the duty of creating a worldwide movement and come down to the world with a great duty is single and separated from his plan, while in the world. However, he is not a single being who is a member of his plan which supports him but the organs of the organization in a state of unity to which the whole of that being is subject.
Well, this is another profound topic that is also hard to talk about because we need to rely on our intuitions. I mean, while we talk about the plan of duty, we cannot say this is this and that is that with some certainty. So, we will elaborate on points we could grasp so far. For example, last week we had remembered that slogan of Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one, as an apt saying to express what we understand the state of ever-growing unity in the plan of duty. And I think, this is meaningful, we can use this in our reflections and meditations. That state of togetherness. Indeed, in this world, at the human stage, we practice the communal life, we learn by living in peoples, tribes, religious groups, sects, communities, countries, nations through many incarnations. This is not an easy thing. Because human beings are sensual, they have earthly cravings, they have their own minds, desires, wants, dreams, egos. Because of these individual differences, executing successful applications within such communities and hence, getting closer to the intuition of duty literally take a whole life, or all lifetimes in the human stage, from our first incarnation as a primitive human to our current lifetime, we continue getting developed through living in communities and groups. And we experience examples of the unity of comprehensions, albeit smallest examples of that unity, mostly within non-profit organizations or charities. Instead of following a leader, the members within such organizations take on many duties, missions, or tasks because of their sense of responsibility towards underprivileged members of their society, or street animals or wildlife preservations, etc. Their names are never known yet they willingly work for the betterment of the life conditions of other people and other living beings. And please notice the quality of their service. The recipients of the results of their labor don't know about who gave or produced what they need. Such persons don't expect thanks or gratitude for their work. I think this is a little bit more than just doing charity. And there are greater examples of a human being's help to another human being. Actually, this is not a help anymore, it is a sense of duty, an awareness of duty towards a fellow human being. I talk about organ donors, and also all those medical staff and surgeons working during transplant operations that may take at least 12 hours. These are civil servants, they don't receive extra payment, and they work event without moving an inch during such operations. Or first responders, firefighters. Those people must have a strong sense of responsibility towards his or her fellow humans, they save life of others every day. I think, in order to receive impressions, intuitions of duty while in this world, people don't need spiritual knowledge. After all, it is not the most advanced knowledge. I think, the most advanced knowledge is the knowledge of duty. And the applications and practices of this knowledge are myriad. Some save forests and trees, some rescue stray animals or wildlife, some save human life, some sacrifice their own life, some teach others, some help others, etc. This is the main application of conscience and sense of responsibility in this point the humanity reached, working for each other. I think, in the Stone Age, at that level of comprehensions, this was not a big need. Yet, here and now, this is our biggest need, to learn work for and with each other consciously. Because, the level of our awareness about our ego, our earthly cravings, our sensuality plays an important role in how we help. Again, there are myriad levels of this. Some wants to be known as the helper, want a taste of feeling a good person or to be known as a good person by others. I don't judge this, no, but it is only a level of development. Yet, some does not want to be known at all. A good and everyday example of this is the pay-it-forward bread or coffee boards at the bakeries or cafes. You know, people pay in advance for a coffee or a loaf of bread meant for someone who cannot afford a warm beverage or some bread. Yes, it is called suspended coffee, suspended bread, etc. So, how we help people indicate the level of our development. From which level we help or do charity work. Almost automatically. More or less intuitively. Or in a complete selfless manner. These are important indicators. We should even take such indicators or points into consideration in the elections while voting for leaders of our countries.
Here, an important point strikes to my attention. Let me read. In very rare cases, a single embodied being in duty who has taken on the duty of creating a worldwide movement and come down to the world with a great duty is single and separated from his plan, while in the world. So, no matter who the being's incarnation will be, I mean, be it a prophet or a country leader, when the being is incarnated in the world and govern that body, it becomes subject to the conditions of the world. He or she will have a childhood, a period of adolescence, education, all phases of a lifetime. And all beings he or she will encounter in that lifetime are an entire organization and its organs. And whatever is the duty to be fulfilled, the system directs and orients the entire organization and its organs accordingly. For example, Prophet Muhammad. His first followers or disciples were in his close circle, his wife, cousins, relatives, and they were well-equipped beings to function in holding the space for that knowledge to be revealed, to be established and progressed. And such beings with duty, because they are now in this world as a human being, of course, they have emotions, thoughts, attitudes in the face of the events of their life, and in opposing or conflicting situations they may question or obstruct things, they may even rave. For example, Jesus Christ says, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" during the crucifixion. I mean, it is not that easy to live as a complete example of duty, to live that degree of sacrifice. And, because of such possible contradictions of the human condition may display, even when a single embodied being in duty comes down to the world, it is as through the entire organizations of duty is incarnated. The appearance may be a single and unique human being, but at the background a whole system takes on and focuses on that duty for directing the course of events as intended. I remember Mr. Attila, the medium of these spiritual communiqués that then compiled by Mr. Ruhselman, when he tried to describe us how he felt during those spiritual sessions, and he had said, "Imagine that there are tens of thousands, millions of beings, but their voice, their comprehension is single. As you said, it is impossible for us to understand this state of unity, but this must be the expression of the voice of the beings that become united in a perceptual point." And, again, in the introduction of this book, Plan names itself as the Voyagers of Destiny, not the Voyager, but Voyagers. A multitude that is a whole, a system, and acts in harmony. Actually, we have examples that are very close to us. Here, this is my hand, I say my hand, and it looks like a single structure. However, for this hand to make a small movement, multiple muscles work after receiving the command from the brain, and to make this small movement millions of cells, millions of nerve cells, millions of neurons are involved. Yet, what I say? Just one hand. And, despite the technological jumps we observe in the robotics, we learn that researchers are still struggling with the complexity of hands. Even the processes as these 3 fingers movement are not properly manageable yet. As you see, we are even not aware of this complex structure and multi-leveled organizations behind a slight movement of our own hand. We are just discovering the dynamics at the background of our so-called ordinary processes. Despite this fact, we are on the lookout for miracles. But here it is, making this or that movement with our hand is a miracle in itself. We can only appreciate this when we lose the dexterity of our limbs, or when we lose them due to an accident or medical amputations. In this world of duality of opposing component of the conscience mechanism, that's how we notice or become aware of the value, and the value differentiation of something only by its absence, getting damaged or shortness. However, the system is a whole, holistic. And our main task in this world, as the human beings that are incarnated into these immensely complex and magnificently efficient bodies, is to govern our bodies, to master these vehicles of our beings. You mentioned the transplant operations. Multiple surgeons and medical staff work in collaboration and cooperation during those operations that may sometimes take a whole day. Each expert is responsible for the part she or he will perform during the long and complex operation, and in harmony with the other surgeons and doctors by creating a united effort. In order to do this, each surgeon must be grounded, in the moment, observe other colleagues to notice what they do or don't in relation to his or her own part. And when one of them completes his or her own part, another one or a team takes over to do their own part. And these processes are so interrelated that a failure or mistake of one of the whole group may affect the functions of others. Imagine that one of the surgeons thinks that his or her part is much more important than the parts of others in the operation team, and disregards the parts and functions of the rest of the team. What happens? Maybe it will cost the life of the patient on the operation table. Thankfully, the aim and the purpose of the whole medical team is to save the patient's life, and this happens only when each member of the team fulfills his or her function properly, no matter how seemingly small their function is. Seemingly, because our perceptions or judgments about what is small or insignificant and what is big or important are warped, due to the narrow perspective we currently have in this world. Yet, sometimes one nail or a ring become the most important point of a whole system. Albeit they look small, they may have a great function for the rest of the whole system. Therefore, as human beings, all of us are doing applications or practices of taking the systems as a whole, of doing our best to see the whole picture, of discerning the functions within the whole, but on the other hand, of bringing out that unity we observe within those systems in this world by acting like an entire organ. Are we doing this? Well, we are trying hard.
Step by step. Level by level. Of course, we don't have the possibility to do this right away. Matter doesn't allow us, and as human beings we cannot live without ego. I mean, the life on earth is not the same with the life of duty. All of our efforts, albeit unknowingly, here is to gain some intuitions about that life, that sense of unity. And at this point, I'd like to say that, it is obvious that what we understand by unity also gets developed as our comprehension widens, level by level, step by step. So, we must be more careful as we talk about unity. We must begin to understand unity as becoming one with the universe, as understanding the universe in accordance with our spiritual level of comprehension.
Your words reminded me our dear teacher Mr. Ericdal's lectures about the beings with duty, especially about prophets. In one of his lectures, he had said to us, if a great duty of orienting a whole community towards a certain goal is organized by the plan of duty, a being as the representative of this plan builds a human body and incarnates in this world to implement that duty. Yes, such a being shoulders that duty because it acquired that merit. Still, as a backup plan, in case that being cannot fulfill its duty, the system always contains a substitute for that duty to be fulfilled. Because the purpose of the entire organization is to fulfill the duty, therefore, possible deviations from the outlined duty have already taken into consideration. And in case such deviations occur within the harsh conditions of the world, a redundancy plan becomes activated. His words had made me rethink about this possibility of deviation that may occur even for such beings with duty. And our dear friends ask in the chat box, that are the beings in duty aware that they have such a duty? Do they have such awareness about it? Of course, such an awareness is not like they go around saying, I have a duty from the plan of duty. Well, if someone does this, it is obvious that that person is acting from the sensuality, from the earthly cravings part of his or her duality unit. On the contrary, when we study the life stories of the great initiates and prophets, we see that they are not self-appointed. They don't go around by saying, look here, I am a prophet, I am a spiritual leader, etc. They simply speak or faithfully convey the flow of incoming influences, intuitions, knowledge to them. They are channels, vessels for this flux of influences. Later, in time, teachings that are established around their statements evolved into religions. But please notice, their duty is not only conveying the incoming influences into words. They also have to live their words, to encounter all kinds of hardships of life events and their human organism bring out. Because their real duty is to do what is hard to do in this world, to find that balance between duty and sensuality.
Yes, this point needs to be underlined many times, because when people hear the term beings with duty, they mistakenly think that such beings are protected by an army of guardian angels all the time, as though they have an easy and comfortable life. No. They are not protected as the way you think. On the contrary, you can see the hardships they had to live through within the cultures they were incarnated into, and how shattered their human egos became in time. The first examples I can think of are the lifetimes of Prophet Muhammad, of Prophet Jesus, and of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Imagine Prophet Muhammad. In the Arab culture, his male ego was shattered each time his sons died, only some of his daughters survived. He experienced the pain of losing all of his sons, and felt the pain as a father. And there are verses in some surahs in the Quran, when the Prophet is scolded by the Sublime Plan, and it is a good indicator of the integrity of the revelations in the Quran. Yes, when the Prophet spent a length of time for explaining the word of God to a rich man but didn't answer the question of a beggar asked, the Sublime Plan fumes about this. Again, in another verse, we read how the Prophet is scolded for closing his heart to the incoming influence, trying to alter the exact words of the verse. So, we understand that, even though he is a being with duty, naturally, he is still a human being with some degree of egoism. And when those beings with duty deviated even an inch from their duty, they became slapped by the divine hand, so to speak. Because of this, please do not think that those beings were wrapped up in cotton wool. Their life was full of hardships, yet, against all odds, they told the things that need to be told, did the things that need to be done. Later, their followers and following generations of followers managed to degenerate the core teachings as we try to adapt these to our level of reality and comprehension. So, on the one hand, there are beings with duty that give a direction to the populations in the world, and on the other hand, there are human beings that try to intuit this sense of duty, as we try to do now.
Our dear friends mostly ask about how they can learn about their duty in life. We had discussed this in our previous videos, and we had said that what we need to do in our lifetime is not a duty but our main task, which is to fulfill the points outlined our life plans. Now, let's accept that, because we are not within the cadres of duty yet, and because we don't have complete comprehension as human beings, it is not much possible to pinpoint what is our task or mission in this world. How far our function expands. Which kind of influence we exert on things. We don't know because we have not reached that level, that vantage point to observe all cause and effect chains at once. We are in this world, within the limits of our five senses. And we can only find our purpose, life task, mission, whatever you call it, within our relations to our inner and outer world. Therefore, we will find it in the roles we take on in our lifetime. If a mother, then doing our best to be a mother. If a dishwasher, then doing our best to be a dishwasher. In short, whatever is the task life brings in front of us, our responsibility toward our being is to give that task its due conscientiously. And our level of conscience is the litmus test showing our mettle in fulfilling our tasks. You know the old adage, what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to or wish for others. This is a rule I try to live my life by. I am sure all of us have those moments. Let's say, you will divide a cake or a cookie in 2 portions to share with someone, and one part looks bigger than other, and even for a fleeting moment, you want to take the bigger one because our desire tends to take the bigger one, yet, at the next moment, you say to yourself, no, this is not fair. Then either you have to make 2 portions equal, or you will curb your desire and make a sacrifice. This is a small example but definitive in the larger ones, as well. I mean, we need to be observing the balance in all of our other acts and deeds in life. We need to be able for observing how a small part affects the other parts and points of the whole. Then, this enlarges our field of responsibility. Then we are not only responsible towards our being about our thoughts, words, acts but also for all other beings and objects that exist within the field of our activity as a human being. Can we do that? Well, not yet, but we are trying to do our best for acquiring that state of encompassment. And, here and now, we are together, as a group of more than 70 people in this online lecture, then it means that we are not content with the reality we live and we search for a way of widening our comprehension so we can change the level of our reality. Some of us find meanings in the religions, some of us find it in philosophy, for some it is science, for some it is exploring nature, for some it is in building a family, for some of us it is in rescuing stray animals. And as we find meanings appropriate to our level of reality, we go through the process of developing. First we make those meanings loftier, then we understand our own reasons for embracing those meanings. Then we make some elimination among those as we change. This gradual action of constructing and deconstructing meanings in time is actually a good thing. It keeps us on the seeker state. It keeps us on the path.
Yes, and what you said about observing the balance of conscience is so important that we need to repeat it again and again. Do we calculate the return of our acts in daily life? Or do we act with some dedication? Because, this is a very important point. For example, you see a stray kitten and buy some nibbles from a market to give that cat. In this act, can we observe our reasons for doing it? We give the food and continue our day, without even seeing the same cat again. I mean, do we do this without any strings attached? For example, expecting the same cat to be nice to us, don't hiss or attack us next time. I mean, do we do good deeds by expecting something in return? Yes, a small example, but we can extend it to larger examples of relating with other beings. So, our dear friends wondering about their duty, well, in that sense, each of us is with duty, in varying degrees. Or, let me express it in a better way. The life task of each of us is to acquire or gain the intuition of duty. We need to become able to sense it. And because of this, we need to observe our real reasons that remain hidden even from our consciousness, that are justified automatically without even we notice. So, let's ask ourselves, why and how this or that action satisfies my egoism? What makes me more inclined to selfishness? And as we discover the reasons behind our actions, then we can search the ways of developing rather altruistic approach to other beings. And, contrary to the general assumption, becoming altruistic is not gullibility, is not the way of losers. Yes, I know that we now live in a world of totally different values, but still, I will tell you that, by becoming altruistic we can only lose from our sensuality, from our earthly cravings, yet we will gain the richness of comprehension and conscience.
Yes, you are so right. Considering the fact that we are in the last period of this world cycle, and before the bells toll indicating the arrival of the graduation day from this world school, we need to work on ourselves more intensely. We are on the last term of this school, and we have some grades and classes we still need to complete. Yes, we have lots of developmental shortcomings and too many inner parts that lean on selfishness, sensuality, carnality, etc. We learnt that the Spechium period and the semi-subtle realm we will make the applications of subtler versions of love have a great function in our completing many of those shortcomings. And remember that, with our current level of comprehension, we cannot properly detect and decide who will complete what at when. It may be that a seemingly insignificant deed will lead a being to a wider comprehension. Until our last breath, we have the chance of completing our lessons in this world. And I think this is what my dear teacher in regression therapy, Roger Woolger, when he said, "We do this work to die well." And now, after reading this book and the knowledge it contains, we are also responsible for applying what we learnt. Therefore, now we learnt that the mental and emotional imagery we accumulated throughout our lifetime, and the last thoughts, emotions and impressions we will have as we die would be those confusing content of the inner tests and trials in the Spechium period. What do we need to do? Yes, we are responsible to become awakened to this, let's say, psychological media library within us. We must awaken to our inner world. We must work on our personal deliriums, fears, anxieties, concerns, patterns, habits, addictions, beliefs, automatisms. Otherwise, life will continue bringing ever harsher shocks to wake us up from this deep existential slumber. We need to be actively awake. Yes, it is not possible to sustain it 100%. It is certain that there will be times we become asleep again. Still, our main task in life is to extend those durations of awakened moments. We must cherish and appreciate those moments of widened comprehension, of conscious states. Because, we don't know if there will be more of such moments in our life. Such conjunctions of destiny, space and time may be opportunities we need to put in good use. We must not waste such moments. Such moments are like it is now or never opportunities of becoming semi-comprehending. Gradually, by making such awakened moment into minutes, hours, days, etc., then we can be much more discerning about what is closely related to our life plan, to the incoming influences from our being, to our development in the midst of this cacophony and bluster of the outer world. We need to be perceptive in order to hear the small voice of the conscience. We need to be perceptive to sense the taste of duty. Only then we can be aware enough to have more free will by becoming master of our inner world, hence, the outer world. Otherwise, we remain asleep, automatically manipulated by the circumstances. Yes, let's check the questions from our dear friends. Let me read one. If everyone embraces altruism, would there be still conflict, resentment, and alienation in the world? First of all, it is not so easy for all human beings becoming altruistic, because each human being is in a different reality, at a different level of comprehension, and have different experiences due to the varying needs of their beings, hence, bringing out diverse value differentiations. I mean, that widening of comprehension in the direction of having mutual values of altruism cannot happen in this world. The divine order and the universe explains the reason of this impossibility as the unsuitability of the hydrogen cosmos matter. If you remember, last week we had discussed the plan of love. We read in this book about this semi-subtle realm where we will have the applications of love that is currently unknown to us. We will have such experiences there and will learn utilizing the semi-subtle matter with the power of imagination. We will begin to discover the real meaning of love. Therefore, all those opposition and conflicts our dear friend mentioned belong to this world, valid in this system. Yet, those seemingly opposing states will be transformed into mutual principles like altruism, harmony, etc. only in the plan of love. After all, The purpose of the human stage is not to reach that state of unity but to progress gradually by swinging the opposing poles of the conscience mechanism. Another question is, in the divine order and the universe, an universal criteria for conscience is given as each deed to be done should harm neither the higher nor the lower. Could you elaborate on this concept?
Well, first of all, this is a topic closely related to the value differentiation and duality, and also, the workings of the conscience mechanism. Now, when we look at events, in general we only see one side of the whole event in accordance with our perspective, with our reality, and we understand that event up to a degree, depending on the current emotional state and the current level of awareness, and of course, to the degree our ego allows us. However, we need to look at them from a wider perspective, if possible, from a vantage point. Most of the time, the events we perceive as unexpected, opposing, shocking, adverse, conflicting, harsh, troubling etc. when we see through our narrow point of view, actually carry influences for advancing the development of individuals and communities. If we can endure the unexpected, opposing, shocking, adverse, conflicting, harsh, annoying, irritating or troubling aspects of the events or people we encounter, we may benefit from such influences those events contain. The example given in that passage our dear friend quoted, that universal criterion of conscience, is about a father beating his child that steals things, and someone intervened them with the so-called good intention, assuming that he or she is doing good, saving a child from the father's beating. Of course, this is just an example. It does not mean that it should be done like this, it does not necessarily to be harsh. Sometimes, because of the necessity of such disciplinary acts, to admonish or to pull the child's ear may be enough. However, if parents never set boundaries, never discipline their children because of different reasons, let's say, out of fear of hurting them, or of fear of to be seen as an old-fashioned parent with outdated approach to parenting, this may prevent the children from learning very important life lessons. If we cannot learn our initial developmentary lessons in life with some degree of disciplinary or challenging aspects, then it becomes necessary for us to learn those lessons through greater traumas. Therefore, you can understand the challenge of the necessity of teaching something important to someone you are responsible for. You need to add values both to the lower and to the higher levels of the conscience. You need to take both levels into consideration. In other words, on the one hand you help someone to get developed more, and on the other hand you allow that person to go through some traumas. Imagine that we are a being in duty, a member of a duty group or an organization, and there is a human being that we are responsible for. Our duty is not to protect that person from every harm, problem, trouble or suffering she or he needs to encounter in life. No, our duty is to provide necessary conditions for that person's properly receiving the influences we send, so can she or he follow the path outlined in the life plan we made together in the spiritual plan. Previously, I had mentioned the pain the Prophet Muhammad felt when his sons died one after another. The organization or group with duty of conveying the influences for the revelations to be spoken by him were not concerned with such worldly pains he might have felt. Their duty was to do the necessary things and occur events for him to follow a certain path in his lifetime. Yes, I can give such examples to explain this criterion of making positive choices in both directions, higher and lower. A state of awareness makes it easier for us to understand this. Yet, our emotional states and automatisms prevent us from understanding this. In the divine order and the universe, we read an example given for the development of love. A young man, when he understands that the woman he loves does not love him or loves someone else, he acts conscientiously, that is, he takes himself out of the equation and does this selfless act out of love, a higher version of love. This may be another example for this criterion, adding conscientious values to higher and lower.
I'd like to reply another question before we say goodbye. The question is, what do you think about some spiritual leaders that shift to the sensuality, earthly craving side? We had discussed this, but let me briefly summarize. Even a being with a duty of influencing the general direction of humankind, when incarnated into this world, appears as a single human being and is subject to all conditions and tests of this world. As to the spiritual leaders, this does not necessarily mean that they are beings in duty. This does not necessarily mean that those persons are superior than other human beings. Their expressions and teachings may contain true values, but we actually see the true developmental level of their being in their acts and behaviors. After all, we expect them to walk the talk. Yet, as our elders in our society said, as the path ascends, the ground becomes more slippery. This means that you may pretend to elevate your reality. You may even think that you elevated it, but if you cannot digest it properly, if you cannot live the requirements of that new reality, especially if you already neglected to complete the previous reality, then your fall from a certain height becomes more damaging. Because of this fact, fulfilling each reality before moving to another is very important. We are humans, and humans err. Therefore, before we acknowledge such labeling like spiritual leader, teacher, master, or guru, we must learn to see each person as a human being that has many lessons to complete in his or her lifetime, just like we do. Yet, we let ourselves to be duped by the appearances, titles, so-called miracles, because we tend to obey than to become the masters of our own self. In general, we expect to be pulled up as our guru ascends the seventh heaven. And there are cases of financial, emotional, and sexual manipulation or abuse on the hands of such spiritual teachers and gurus. But please remember what we had discussed about how the intensity of events increases when we don't learn our lessons during the initial and less troubling events. Such extreme cases tell us many things not only about such gurus and spiritual leaders but also about their followers, because in most cases, the sensuality and earthly cravings of the individual that make up the whole body of the followers is the fuel for such a leader or guru's deviation or ethical corruption. There is a saying in our culture, the teacher does not fly but his students make him fly. This is a word play to point to the exaggerated expectations of the followers from a spiritual teacher. If the teacher is not sensational, then there is no satisfaction they get from his teachings or statements. Again, such examples are not in vain. People that are involved learn precious lessons, albeit harsh and traumatic lessons. People that witnessing such events learn precious lessons, as the branch knowledge. Karmic connections also play a role in such examples. Therefore, in short, such persons are good reminders that we need to take responsibility of our own self. We cannot get developed by giving, surrendering our responsibility to others. This is an expectation that cannot be met. So, once again, let's do our best to know ourself, our inner world, our shadows. As we learn more about ourself, we will become less automatic and more conscious as we make decisions and choices in our life. And once again, let's remember that we are all human beings. We can make mistakes, yet as long as we learn from our mistakes, we advance on our spiritual journey, both as individuals and as communities. Yes, with these words, let me wish you all a good evening. Hoping to see you all next week.
Yes, next week, we will come back with more and beneficial examples about the topic we will read. Good evening.